Welcome to Ethics and Decision Making. I'm Corporal Sarah Fox. This information contained in this presentation is adapted from the Detention Officer Certification Course module, Ethics and Decision Making. Ethics and professionalism have always been of critical importance to detention. To achieve the goal of providing the highest quality service to the public, law enforcement agencies depend on the action of each individual employee. The actions of the individual reflect on every other employee. As you interact with the public, you as the individual become the agency that you represent. The people you come in contact with will base their opinion of law enforcement on their experience with you. Each employee has the responsibility of having high personal and professional standards. You must live up to them and strive to have those around you live up to professional standards. This may appear to be a goal which will be hard to achieve. However, it is a matter of making one decision at a time and carefully weighing it against the standards you have set. Persons incarcerated in a detention facility, regardless of the reason, have much to gain and little to lose from the special attention they receive from an employee. The gain would be even greater for the committed inmate when compared to the pre-trial detainee. Those persons housed in your detention facility have working minds that have created an opportunity for each of them to spend time in your facility. Often, if not typically, the inmates are deviant in thought and are always focused on the opportunity for personal gain. This block of instruction will not change unethical or immoral people into ethical, moral people, but it will provide a foundation to prepare you to behave ethically when confronted with a variety of situational dilemmas. Student objectives are: we will define the terms ethics and morals and professionalism. We will describe what factors or influences are factors in making ethical decisions in the detention environment. We will define the terms setup or con game, discuss the techniques of a setup, list the tools of a setup, identify the steps in the turnout process, and discuss the impact social media may have on one's ethics. Society generally expects detention personnel to exemplify right and moral conduct. Citizens fail to realize that we are chosen from the general public, that we are just human beings and are subject to all of the human emotions and weaknesses. Inmates in your detention facility may be creating angles to take advantage of officers for personal gain. Persons detained in detention facilities do not necessarily think and process information like you do. They do not have the diversity in their daily activities that we enjoy. They are confined. They are deprived of a mental challenge. Therefore, they are challenged to gain an advantage of the situation. Unfortunately, you will be the target. Will you be ready to respond in the right way? The term moral and ethical in our daily conversations are almost always synonymous. Generally, morality is the measure of conduct and ethics is the study of morals. So morality is the measure of conduct and ethics is the study of those morals. People are thought of as immoral in character and doing unethical deeds. Regardless of the term used, what we are referring to is an individual's behavior and how it affects others. We are not usually concerned with the way people think or feel unless it has some bearing on what they actually do about their beliefs. So it is behavior that is judged by others, not beliefs. We address human behavior in this manner, as opposed to animal behavior or behavior of natural elements. A dog may be judged to be a good dog or a bad dog based on whether he bites or not. The weather may be judged to be good or bad based on whether it's raining or not. Animals and natural elements would not be compared into terms of ethics or morality to humans. However, humans have one distinction that animals and elements do not possess. That is the thought capacity of choice, the ability to reason and select. This does not make minors or others who do not have mental faculties to make choices. As detention officers and detention employees, we have to abide by the moral codes or rules of the society in which we work. This is classified as moral ethics. Professional ethics, Professionalism in corrections is a word used to admonish a specific attitude and job approach. In its strictest sense, it refers to communicating and acting in a manner that distinguishes a person of skill and knowledge from an amateur. Professionalism is a state of mind, a type and style of dignity. If you ever aspire to achieve a high degree of professionalism, you must first believe yourself capable of the accomplishment. You are what you think you are, nothing more, nothing less. If you believe a certain task is impossible, then for you it will be impossible. On the other hand, if you believe no accomplishment is too great, your achievements will amaze everyone. A feeling of self-worth develops the natural traits of self-confidence and self-assuredness. As these traits are being perfected, mental and emotional stability reward the practitioner. An attitude follows that governs speech, actions, and movements, which in turn develops a type and style of dignity to fit the individual personality. Some factors in professionalism include attitudes, how the employee views himself and others, how they treat others based on their views, and how the prejudices affect their ability to deal with others. Ethical conduct. What choices you make based on your morals and ethics. Are your morals and ethics in conflict with the ethics of your profession? I would hope that you wouldn't be taking this class if your morals and ethics were in conflict with the job that we do here. Good communication skills. Do you have the ability to properly relay a message with words and body language and not misinterpret or prejudice others? Think about your body language. I want to say 92% of messages are sent through body language. So really think about the way that your body's handled, the way that you are standing, the way that you are relaying messages with just your body language and not just your words. And then knowledge through education and training. You have to self-initiate training sometimes, as well as the department offered and department required training. Ethics is a standard of conduct and moral judgment governing an individual or a profession. Great professions have long recognized the importance of subscribing to and living by rules of official conduct for your membership. The most noteworthy has been the Hippocratic Oath, founded by Hippocrates, the father of medicine, sometimes before 400 BC. This oath is still taken by practicing physicians today. The American Bar Association subscribes to the rules of professional conduct, and these associations have means of disciplining unethical elements in their professions. Detention employees have codes of conduct called the Criminal Code of Ethics, the American Jail Association Code of Ethics for Officers, and Codes of Ethics for Law Enforcement Officers. Are these sets of principles enough? A code is a set of ideals which may be difficult to live up to in absolute. Problems are not always presented with clear-cut choices. Parameters of decision-making. Everyone has freedom of choice and behavior. The old belief that life's circumstances override voluntary actions is quickly fading. We are influenced to some extent by limitations of birth and circumstance. However, there are always choices to make, whether or not we recognize them and choose to examine them. Every day, we choose whether or not to get up in the morning, take a bath, go to work, the route to take to work, what we eat, what we wear, who we talk to, etc. The available choices may not always be to our liking, but the choices are there, and we make a selection from these choices based on our own free will. We measure behavior in terms of acceptability and unacceptability based on the beliefs and rules of the society. The different social parameters including our behavior can include our immediate family. So our immediate family really affects how we govern ourselves and how we make a decision. Do you think about, well, what will my mom think if I make this decision? Or what will my children think? What will my spouse think, or my significant other? We think about our families when we are thinking about what we are going to do and what our behavior is going to be and how it might affect them. We think about how our church might influence our behavior. So our churches teach us the right and wrong based on certain beliefs, and we want to not make them feel bad about what we are doing and just not embarrass ourselves in front of our church family. Our neighborhood, they're always worried about what the neighbors think, right? So we don't want to have to worry about what we do affects our neighbors and what they think of us. School, our children go to school and we think about what our behavior is going to be or how it's going to affect our children in school and what our children's principals and teachers think of us when we make these decisions and these behaviors. Work environment. Obviously, our decisions that we make during work and in our home life can definitely affect our work environment and our work family. We don't want to lose our jobs because of decisions that we've made at work. And our city and our nation. Our city and our nation affect our behavior because of the way we are brought up, because of the rules and the laws and just the norms that we have. We make our decisions from the selection of choices based on our social surroundings or our scope of circumstances. Each society has its own set of rules by which the society members are expected to abide. If a member violates the rules, the member may be judged to be unethical or immoral. Determining if someone is unethical or immoral is not always as easy as it appears. We all know the difference between right and wrong behavior. We can all agree that stealing and theft are wrong and unlawful. But, based on our social surroundings or our scope of circumstances, can stealing or theft ever be justified? For example, the shootings in Vegas a few weeks ago. A gentleman stole a truck to take people to the hospital, and he used that truck multiple times to take them to the hospital. Now, he stole a truck. In any other circumstance, that would be a bad idea, and he would have to answer for that for the law. But instead, he made a choice to save people's lives, and he was actually given a truck, and thanking him for that, what he did for them. Another example may be a mother who's a single parent of 5 small children suddenly finds herself in a terrible situation with no food to serve her starving children, and she has no money. She finds herself in a no-win position and believes the only option is to steal food from the grocery store in order to provide for her children. She may break the law by stealing, but is she unethical or immoral? Your decisions may be different based on the scope of immediate circumstances around you, so we have to look at the immediate circumstances around us when we are making decisions and decide what's best. I'm sure that at any other time, that gentleman that stole that truck would have never done that, except for that situation in Vegas. Many times officers find a way to violate the spirit of ethical standards while complying with exact wording. It's a game we play to justify our conduct when facing tempting choices that may not be acceptable within given rules. One way to recognize and examine our choices is to discuss our options and reasonings with others. Others can help us define our scope of circumstances or help us to consider our options within the boundaries of our profession. Veteran detention employees are aware of this concept and many times express this by limiting the people they choose to receive input from and allow to influence them. So we all have those people that we talk to about certain things that we want their influence or their input. Also those people that you don't ask for help, that you are just an acquaintance with, that you would never ask them because you know that they would not give you the right answer. Before taking action, consider the following questions. Does the action I'm considering sound right? Does it sound right to you? If you do this, will it be the right thing? Does it sound like it? Does this action violate laws, rules, or policies? And then how will this action look to others when exposed to the light of day or public scrutiny? This is a big one, because especially in our profession, anything that we do could be on WEZT, or the sheriff will find out about it. Is the decision that you're going to make and the action you're going to do, is the sheriff going to be okay with that? Or is he going to look at that and say, oh, no, you should not have done that? Or can you look at yourself in the mirror and say, yes, you made the right decision? If we choose not to discuss our situations with others, what's the reasoning behind that? I think, and you think about it yourself, but I think that if we are choosing not to discuss it with others, we know there's something wrong with it. Or we don't want to hear what they have to say because we know that it's not going to be what we want to hear. We overestimate the cost of doing the right thing and underestimate the the cost of failing to do the right thing. So we want to do the right thing. Is there a cost to it? Possibly. But doing the right thing is always better than doing the wrong thing, because the cost of doing the wrong thing is astronomical, including losing family, friends, jobs, things like that. Games criminals play. Ethics basically boils down to knowing the difference between right and wrong and doing what is right. If we do our jobs fairly and honestly, respect the rights of others, and follow the rules and regulations of the agency, we will avoid most ethical problems. If doing the right thing was so easy, however, we wouldn't need to discuss it. It's those few situations that are not so clear which may cause problems. Working in a detention facility can be a tricky business. Sometimes staff may be unsure as to what is right and what is wrong in a particular situation. For example, an inmate may tell you that he wants his letter to his sick mother to reach her in time for her birthday. To mail the letter so that it will reach the destination in time. Policy clearly states that you must not mail letters or packages for inmates. But you think, what harm could mailing one letter to a sick woman do? The right thing to do suddenly becomes blurry. So we think about that. Think about all the things that could be going on. Could it really be a sick mother? Yeah, but why can't he go through the normal process? There's a reason he doesn't want to go through the normal process. Most of us working in a detention have a trusting nature, at least at the beginning. We hear and believe inmates' stories and act upon their information. Before acting on information supplied by inmates, we should verify it. By reading files and asking others if the offender's information is reliable, we will not allow dishonest inmates to manipulate us. New employees soon realize that not all inmates are honest, and not all inmates are dishonest. We must have the ability to analyze not only the movements, words, and actions of inmates, but our own as well. We must constantly be aware of the message we are sending to the inmate and other staff. An inmate remarked to a female employee, "If I had one wish, I'd wish to go home with you." The remark seemed innocent enough, but her response was to come back to haunt her. She replied, "I doubt if the institution would approve of that," and they shared a good laugh. The inmate interpreted the statement as if the institution didn't mind, she wouldn't mind. Later, he tried to compromise her ethics. So they can take anything that you say and turn it around to their own benefit, so you have to be very careful. Manipulation cannot take place without a victim, and victims are not capriciously selected. The result of a careful, close, silent study by the inmates determine the likelihood of a victim selection. Employees become vulnerable and unsuspecting of the multitude of subtle techniques inmates develop to read them. Our movements, words, and actions supply the manipulators with a great deal of information in the vital setup process. It does not matter what it is called. Some people call it a setup, while other people may refer to it as a con game. Whatever it is called is a deliberate selection, collection, and direction of events which, when enacted, will have a negative effect on the institution and the employee who is involved. Inmates watch and gather information on officers. Inmates know which employees distract easily and allow illegal activities to go unnoticed. Inmates soon realize which officers can probably be coerced into granting favors or breaking rules. Victim selection. Who can be set up? Neither a high level of intellect nor a college degree can keep an officer or an employee from being set up, nor does age, gender, experience, rank, or years of service. Ultimately, everyone is a candidate for the setup. Some of the characteristics that may cause you to be more susceptible than others are listed. The intentional selection. Naivety. Staff members who become overly familiar with inmates are said to be naive. The actual meaning of the word is having or displaying in a simple and trusting nature, lacking in experience, lacking in careful judgment or analysis, and being unsophisticated. Other characteristics of naivety may include the green officer, so the brand new one, the gullible officer, the one who believes what they hear, or the employee who is ignorant of the basic rules. Overfamiliarization. Employees who are being overly friendly and overly familiar with an inmate may be opening themselves up to a setup. Professional people usually display a friendly personality, and supervisors expect employees to be that way. However, inmates often see this trait as a weakness, unless the employee can make a distinction between friendliness and familiarity. An employee can be friendly without being overly familiar with an inmate. Being overly familiar with inmates may include becoming personally involved with an inmate. So if you become personal friends with an inmate or with an inmate's family, that's becoming personally involved. You want to have a professional environment, a professional relationship, not a personal one. Discussing personal problems or financial matters with an inmate. No, that is a bad idea. What happens when you discuss especially your financial matters with an inmate? They may find a way to compromise you by realizing that you have maybe a need for more money. They may have a solution for you that may be one that is illegal. Officers and inmates addressing each other by their first names. We always have to address them by Miss or Mr. We always want them to identify us by our rank or Miss or Mr. It is not appropriate to identify people by their first name. An officer showing inconsistencies in the enforcement of rules between inmates. We have to be fair, firm, and consistent with every inmate, no matter what, no matter who they are. And then officers who promise favors to inmates that are not within the officer's scope of responsibilities. We can't promise them anything, and I don't do favors for anyone. I think I've said this before, that a favor is something special. But taking care of something for an inmate because it is the right thing to do, that's totally different. If it's within your scope of responsibilities, that's fine, but we do not do favors. Accidental selection. Accidental selection occurs with hidden weaknesses. In this selection process of a victim, the victim is not always intentionally selected. Occasionally, manipulators inadvertently discover a weakness in an officer, victim, or employee, and an accidental selection occurs. Any trait possessed by an employee that inmates can construe as weakness can result in that individual's selection as a victim of a setup. Change in job assignment or family status. Inmates know that changes and anticipated changes can tend to make a person more vulnerable to an inmate's attention. The change or anticipated change can be job-related or family-oriented and can be positive or negative in nature. In either case, emotions seem to be more at the surface, and inmates can scan for those signs. Pegging employees. Inmates peg detention officers and detention employees for what their attitudes and actions represent to them, and the inmates are amazingly accurate in their final opinion. Inmate manipulators place detention officers and detention employees into 3 categories: soft, hard, and mellow. Soft employees are usually very trusting, overly familiar, and naive. They are understanding and sympathetic to inmate problems and have a strong desire to help those in need. These are not all bad qualities, but combined with the inability to say no or to take command of a situation, they produce a person susceptible to manipulation. Hard employees are those who go strictly by the rule book. These are the employees that are demanding, ruthless, and combative, and they grant an inmate no leeway. The hard employees may give the impression that they are too good to be a detention officer, and may have little or no association with other officers. These are the ones that they're halfway out the door, they don't want to be in the back, they don't see any gray area, everything's black and white. And then the mellow officer. The mellow officer are those who know when to be soft, when to be hard, and how to use these traits at appropriate times. Inmates concentrate on the soft person and the hard person. The soft person because of the hesitancy to say no or take command, and on the hard person because the inmate feels the hardness disguises a weakness in the individual. Inmates leave the mellow person alone, not because that person cannot be manipulated, but because the process would take too much time. The appropriateness of a mellow person's actions discourages the manipulation process. And I think of this like they go for the easy larceny. So they're going to go through a parking lot, let's say, and check car doors. They're not going to try to break into someplace unless they really see something that they want. They're going to try all the cars that have open doors, and they're going to steal from them. It's just an easier peg. Techniques of a setup. Observation naturally begins the process in the setup procedure. Manipulation cannot take place without a victim, and victims are selected through a predicted pattern. The result of a careful, close, and silent study by the inmates determines the likelihood of victim selection. Good shoppers look around and compare. They want the best for the return of their vested investment. Employees become vulnerable and unsuspecting to the multitude of subtle techniques inmates develop to read them. Officers' movements, words, and actions supply these manipulators with a great deal of information vital to the setup process. From the officers' responses to seemingly harmless questions, inmates formulate staff personality profiles and decide which officer might bend or skirt around institutional rules and regulations. So remember that the inmates have nothing better to do than to watch us and observe us and figure out how to set us up. So the first way that they do it is through body language. The manner and method in which detention officers carry themselves gives off messages. The shrewd onlooker wants to know if the employee is unsure in a situation, if there's a lack of confidence, if there exists a dislike for the job, if a situation can instill fear, and a wide range of other personality traits. So we think about the new employee who walks into a housing unit for the first time. They don't know what's going on. They look like they're scared, or they look like they just don't have any idea. If they're afraid of someone, if there's a dislike for the job, so you have someone that's been here a few years and now is disgruntled, inmates are going to know that. Actions such as tugging at the earlobe, biting the lip or fingernails, constant folding and unfolding of the arms at inappropriate times, not knowing what to do with their hands, shifting from foot to foot when one should be standing still, display nervous actions that under certain conditions can convey a variety of messages. So think about what your body language is saying. If you're standing talking to an inmate with your arms crossed, with a scowl on your face, that's totally different than having an open posture. One's attire can also transmit body language messages. Unpressed clothing, a partial uniform, buttons left open, indicates sloppiness and could be interpreted as inattention to detail. Inmates may assume from this that a person will allow the taking of certain liberties. Manipulators read these messages and make determinations about them. Officers should be aware of their own body language. So think about when you come to work and you have pressed your clothing, that you are looking good, you've done your hair, if you're a female, you've done makeup, things like that, how you look then, as opposed to if you've just rolled right out of bed, thrown some kind of clothes on and come to work. It makes a big difference. Your presence makes a difference in how inmates see you. Listening observation. Whether you like it or not, conversations are constantly monitored by inmates. By not being aware who is listening or how your words can be interpreted, employees may very well provide the foundation for a selection as a setup victim. Inmates need input for their early evaluation of the personality profile. They want to find predictable patterns they can rely on. Much information can be collected by listening to how our officer responds to supervisors, peers, and other inmates. Inmates will listen to conversations that officers have in the hallways, on the telephone, and the corridors. Personal data such as home addresses, phone numbers, spouse's job, number of cars, and the like provide valuable information in helping formulate a lifestyle picture. Always be aware of who's listening. The inmates listen to everything we say, even when they are behind a cell door. They listen to everything we say. So they know more than we do about each other. A verbal observation. In this process, the inmate engages an employee in conversation. The inmate may make a subtle allusion to a rule infraction, tragic experiences, sex, of any subject that tends to jeopardize a professional interaction. And remember, that's what we're trying to do, is professional. The inmate carefully monitors the individual's movements and facial expressions. While the inmate is busy in conversation with the employee, more needed information about the employee is gathered. The inmate will look for signs of approval or disapproval. The inmate wants to know if the conversation makes the officer feel uncomfortable, or if the inmate can feed the officer's ego. Jokes reflecting the sensual side of life, stories of sad experiences, and tales of injury situations provide gauges of how the employee feels on such matters. So I was taught very early when I came in as a female officer here that when an inmate made a suggestive comment to me or tried to compliment me, I had to shut them down quickly because of this sort of thing. Action observation. In action observation, the inmate actually violates the rule to determine whether or not the inmate's theory on the officer's reaction is correct. This action involves some risk on the inmate's part, but remember, the officer has been well observed, and the violation will be extremely minor at first. This is a way of testing the officer or the employee to see what action might be taken against them. If the officer or employee ignores the verbal suggestion to the minor rule infraction and looks the other way, the inmate will act out the violation. Inmates will create situations to see how an employee will act under certain circumstances. The test of limits. The test of limits is the process of pushing, bending, breaking, or superventing minor rules. How far can the inmate go before the officer or employee reacts? The inmate proceeds slowly so as not to shock the officer. I look at this like our yellow line. If the inmate crosses the yellow line boldly, you're more likely to say something. But if the inmate just creeps up to the yellow line, the officer may or the employee may resist saying something, and then the inmate knows that they've got some leeway. Inmates may make minor suggestions or requests for items or liberties which they are not allowed. Requesting that the officer buy them a soda or a drink, or allow them to have canteen out of their cell, or after helping an officer keep the noise down in the housing unit, they may ask for an additional phone call or additional time out of their cell or time on the kiosk. If officers and employees ignore or give in to minor circumventing of the rules, inmates feel that you can be coerced into major ones. Tools of a setup. Detention employees are hired for their good qualities, and you should strive to maintain these good qualities throughout your career. Consequently, employees must guard against the inmates taking advantage of emotions that are expressed in front of the inmates. The tools utilized by inmates are the officer's own feelings and concerns. The steps presented in this section follow the typical sequence of appearance in the setup process. However, they may proceed in any order as they are calculated to validate another step's credence. So the first step is the support system, a series of phrases designed to befriend and develop a sense of togetherness and understanding between the inmates and the officers sum up the inmate support system. This step begins subtly and spirals using verbal and non-verbal approaches. Inmates may begin this process by uplifting the officer's ego. They may make comments like, "You're the best," "You're not like the other officers," "That was a great idea." Inmates will give officers and employees a pledge of faith and devotion in an effort to strengthen the friendship. You're made to feel that you are something special, that the other officers and employees do not understand, and that where the officer or employee could not trust the co-workers, they can count on the inmates. So the inmates are trying to get the employee on their side, not our side. In this process, there seems to be a reliance on the inmates to make your job easier. By developing trust, the inmate may seem indispensable. When this happens, there's a loss of effective control. Empathy and sympathy. Inmates often try to do the right thing, and in the process discover an employee whose heart goes out to them. The inmates enjoy this attention and will go to any length, such as lying, to maintain it. Empathy and sympathy are close associates, but with one or two major differences. In empathy, an officer can understand and identify with the inmate's problems without feeling sorry for the inmate. In sympathy, officers can easily be manipulated for feeling sorry for inmates and their problems. So empathy is, I'm sorry that you are going through this and I understand that you're having a rough time. In sympathy, we quickly say, I'm sorry just for whatever's going on. In empathy, we're saying, I understand what's going on. I think I misspoke earlier. Empathy bases itself on a shared understanding, experience, or experience of feelings, thoughts, or attitudes. It draws forth the intellectual identification in these areas of one person with another, and it forms a bond. Empathy does not command compassion or pity, just the sameness of feeling, so you understand what they are feeling. In sympathy, it demonstrates a feeling without necessarily having had the experience or produced emotion. Pity or compassion for another's troubles affirms the sympathetic feeling. Pleas for help. Rehabilitation, change of lifestyle. In this phase of the setup, inmates bank on the employee's need for ego fulfillment and closure. Employees want to know that they perform well in a worthwhile job and like to see results. Unfortunately, many of us never see the results. We never see the successful completion of our work. Most detention employees strive to help the inmate return to society as a good citizen. If they succeed, the inmate is never seen again, but employees are still faced with recidivists. So we see the same people over and over again, so it gets frustrating because we know we've done things for them and it still doesn't work. Because detention employees rarely run into the positive results of their efforts, they are highly susceptible to pleas for help. An inmate who has expressed faith in an officer or employee will confess that he's been a failure all his life, that he lacks confidence, he wishes to change his lifestyle. The inmate will discuss family, religion, money, and elicit sympathy for a life gone wrong. The inmate may say to the officer, you and your unique abilities are the only things that will rehabilitate me. I need your help. This is a delicate situation to handle. A sincere inmate must be helped. It's part of our job. How then can one be assured that an inmate is making an honest request as opposed to setting someone up? The truth is no one can be assured. But what an employee can do is try to check it out, test the inmate. The way to do this is to discuss the problem with someone else and make sure the inmate knows that another employee is aware of the request. Keep everything out in the open. In many ways, how we can help someone in this phase without being manipulated is by referring them to the appropriate places. We have Community One now that refers people to all over the state for whatever they need, whether it's rehab, halfway house, job, whatever it is, they help them out with that. So sometimes doing the best thing is telling them, get on the kiosk and do a request for Community One. Or here's the street sheet that has all the information that you need. Confidentiality. Beware of confidentiality. Inmates who attempt to establish a you and me situation will tell an officer a problem that must be kept secret. There is nothing so secret that it cannot be shared with someone else. If the request for confidentiality is sincere, the inmate will welcome aid from counselors, chaplains, etc. 2 minds are better than 1. A detention employee's job is to help inmates, and even though the heart may go out to all the difficult circumstances an inmate may be in, the employee must help the inmate in a prescribed manner using the facility's policies and procedures. The we-they syndrome. They separate the victim from the staff. The we-they situation demonstrate perhaps the most subtle of the setups and always pit one officer or employee against another. Inmates want their proposed victim to identify with the inmates and not with the other employees. The inmates may make comments like, they don't understand you, but we do, or they are wrong about you, you're not like that at all, or they are treating you like they treat us. The inmate wants the officer to think, I'm okay, you're okay, but they're not okay. In a similar background, another approach using the we-they syndrome is to dwell on similar backgrounds between inmates and the officer. The use of the same ethnic background, same neighborhood background, or same circumstance background puts pressure on the officer or the employee. Obviously, all the inmates deserve fair and equal treatment. and employees must not fall into the we-they trap. Offer of protection. Minor offers. Another tool of the setup is the inmate's ability to offer protection to the employee. The inmate may create a feeling of friendliness and trust with the employee. The inmate may be willing to take the blame for something you allowed him to do. There is an assurance that the inmate will not let anything happen to you. But a serious offer is the more graphic example of an offer of protection, is found in situations where the offer is presented after instilling a feeling of fear. In an area where an enclosure exits, inmates point out to the victim how easy it would be for someone to force them into a forbidden spot and harm or kill them. So I think of this as our vestibules between housing units, between the housing unit door and the hallway door. That's a very vulnerable place. Rapid assurance is they will not let anything happen to the employee, and that rounds out the conversation. The employee is grateful for the concern and shows signs of willingness to become friendlier than ever before. Allusion to sex. If the victim is female, when an inmate manipulates a female officer for sex, conditions and situations must be carefully planned and implemented so as to not create suspicion, while the inmate maneuvers her into a position for the demand. The inmate will initiate the ploy by developing an overly familiar friendship with the female officer. The inmate creates an image of himself or herself that directly opposes someone seeking sex. The officer develops a trust and naivety that leaves her vulnerable to proposition first, insistent sex second, and finally. Inmates find great importance on how female officers respond to sexual comments from the inmates. If a female officer or employee makes no comment at all, the inmate assumes that the freedom to make further allusions to sex. If the employee makes a comment, well, inmates are like that. The inmate assumes that the woman has a basic understanding of the needs of inmates in confinement and feels safe in continuing the process. If the female employee requests more details, the inmate formulates the opinion that she anxiously permits further discussion on sexual matters. But if the female employee's response is cold and indifferent, her reaction will have the effect of closing the subject and may stop further attempts at manipulation. A female officer or employee must be aware that if she works alone with an inmate for long periods of time, rumors may get started. Statements like, "I wonder what's going on in there," develop into "something is going on in there." As the suspicion transfers from one officer to another or one employee to another, it gains distortion and force, and it resulted in some officers resigning from their job. If the victim is male, allusions to sex extend to male officers also in the form of a dirty joke, a pornographic story, a girly magazine, etc. The intent is to communicate on a non-professional level, form a common bond, and perhaps get the employee to relate some personal information. Allusions to sex are designed to use sex as a lever on male officers in order to get them to bring contraband into the facility. The touch system. Any form of touching forms a closer bond between two people. Friends shake hands and share hugs. Inmates may use many natural touching techniques to move within the parameters of your intimate space. Watch out, the touch system may include one or more of the following: shaking hands, pats on the back, placing a hand on a shoulder, inadvertent bumping into an officer, straightening the collar or tie, which I think is very vulnerable. Comments like, "Oh, what a pretty necklace, let me see," or brushing a dirt speck from the officer's clothing. We are taught to keep inmates at a distance, like 5 to 6 feet. So when they're getting up in your personal space, that's when you have to stop them and move them back, or move yourself back and make sure that they understand that they need to keep a good space between you. The rumor clinic. A well-placed rumor will create doubt in the minds of everyone, employees and inmates. The inmate plants seed thoughts that lead to the breakdown of professionalism among the gossips, staff, and inmates alike. Adverse, untrue rumors can be started by anyone, anytime, anywhere. Inmates and employees alike may make comments like, "We know it's not true, but," or "Did you hear the latest?" Inmates want to see employees sweat. Don't participate in the rumors. Neither tell them nor listen to them. Notify your supervisor immediately and discuss the situation. If you feel that you are a victim of a setup, Notify your supervisor and discuss the situation. Discuss the situation with other officers and keep it all on the table. Hold on. You want to discuss it with other officers because they might be experiencing the same thing and don't really realize yet what is going on, but you have realized it. It keeps the rumors at bay. The turnout process. The turnout is an officer who, by the means of deception and manipulation, has successfully been coerced into supplying inmates with illegal contraband or favors. This position is normally achieved gradually and in a progressive nature. The turnout phase of this process is the point where inmates make the wants known to the officer. Before taking this step, the inmate must be confident that the officer will be controlled. When the inmate feels the officer can be controlled, the inmate is going to make his demands and expose his true intention. When the setup process reaches this point, the employee realizes that they are at the point of no return. They feel that they cannot back out. The actions which have seemed in the past to be friendly, innocent, and helpful have now become deadly serious. The ultimate turnout step is quick, dangerous, and final. Acquiring contraband is one reason the inmates conceived the setup in the first place. Everything that transpired was leading up to this point. The testing, the support, the friendship concern, all zeroed into their calculated intent to make urgent, through sometimes polite requests for prohibited goods based on what seems to be a valid need. At this point, the setup has been exposed. The officer now knows that he has been compromised. The employee's reactions may be shock, disbelief, and the officer's judgment's now impaired because they never thought that this would be them. They didn't realize what was going on, and now they are impaired because that's what they're thinking about and they're second-guessing themselves. The inmates know they risk disciplinary action for the request, so for the inmates involved, backing out is never considered. The only way an employee can back out is with administrative repercussions. So the officer can back out, but they know that something's going to happen to them if they do. They're going to have to report it to their supervisor, and there may be repercussions. The inmate's shopping list of demands may include one or more of the following: drugs, alcohol, money, weapons, or sex. It is important to note that an inmate will initially solicit contraband on a one-time only basis, and it only becomes a demand if the officer refuses his polite request. The reality, however, is that once this demand is met, requests will continue until a game is discovered by administration, and will keep increasing, and they are never going to stop until they decide to. The lever in a detention facility is the seemingly harmless minor infraction of the rules of the facility. Examples may include giving an inmate an extra tray of food, mailing a letter for an inmate, looking the other way in regards to infractions to rules. In other words, a lever is some type of rules violation that can be used to threaten or coerce a staff member into bringing in contraband or providing inmates with favors. A lever forces an employee to respond through the proper distribution of pressure from the inmate, and herein lies the backup point for the entire setup process. If the inmate has done his job properly, the right distribution of pressure has been applied, and now he gets into a position to make his demand. The inmate acquired a lever, and the device is going to force an officer into breaking the law. This is usually the last ploy, but may be obtained any time during the setup. The inmate has kept it under cover until now. The inmate may seem humanitarian in nature and state, "Look, I don't want to have to turn you in." The officer's reaction may be acceptance or refusal that the situation is really happening. Changes in the officer's personality. They may become abnormally quiet, socialize less and less with other officers, and develop a worried expression, because it's only a matter of time before they're caught. The sting. The look of a rose bush seems quite innocent. As a matter of fact, the bush appears quite attractive. Yet, come in contact with it, and its sting from the thorns feels most uncomfortable. A setup is similar to a rose bush with one major difference. Its sting can be lethal. The sting wraps up all the steps in the setup. The officer has undergone all steps, and a lever has been established, and the shopping list presented. The officer must now decide to do as you are told or you will be harmed. No one wants to be hurt, and most inmates involved in a setup would rather not resort to the use of force, but as a last resort, one can rest assured they will. The final sting has caused some officers to resign, leave their jobs in disgrace, and other officers to die. If the officer succumbs to the threatened use of lever or the threatened use of force, and brings in contraband or performs illicit favors, the inmates have won battle of the minds. They possess the will of the officer. For some reason, it appears that the inmates still lack satisfaction. After the officer has performed over a period of time, the inmates will expose the officer's indiscretions if the authorities have not yet caught the officer in the act. When the setup reaches the last stage, most officers and employees comply with the demand. Some will resign. Others will take the risk of being injured or embarrassed when the lever is introduced and expose the involved inmates. This is a high-risk situation, and the rewards are small. Now we're going to change direction just a little bit and talk about social networking and misconduct. Social networking is a community of individuals with common interests and backgrounds. It may take place in person, but most often in the context of this lesson plan, it takes place online. Some examples of social networking community include Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Snapchat, Kik, and many others. Facebook. Based on the profile format, but with customization available to the user has friends who may comment on postings, photos, or videos shared by the user. Facebook allows users to update their page in real time, notifying the public immediately of news, events, or emergency conditions. Posting a picture. Think about, what are you doing in the picture? Could it be construed as inappropriate, unseemly, or illegal? Are you engaged in an official police activity that could be considered an open investigation or a violation of policy if posted? Who are you with? Are you with other officers, minors, or others that may not want to be pictured online? Think about some of our officers who do undercover work. They can't be online. Making a comment. Could your comment be considered racist, sexist, or otherwise discriminatory or derogatory? Does your comment reflect negatively on your agency or a coworker? Linking a cause or an organization. A link to this page will now be placed on your profile, and others who visit this page may see your picture and link to your profile. Are you sure you want to be directly associated with this cause or organization? Friending someone. Do you know this person? Do you trust this person with your personal information? Could a link to this person negatively affect your role as a law enforcement officer? People have been fired for their Facebook activities. Don't let that be you. Twitter. Twitter is a microblogging tool that allows users to send short messages that will immediately be distributed to their network of followers. People can receive tweets without having a Twitter account. LinkedIn is a professional contact database. The average user is a 41-year-old and has a household income of over $100,000. Members are connected in varying degrees based on their personal relationship with others. This format is primarily used for job searches and business connections. Social media blogs are updatable postings of information by which the blogger can communicate with large numbers of followers at once. YouTube and Vimeo are video sharing platforms which allow users to upload, watch, and share video clips. All of these applications provide many ways for an individual to complain about work, brag on accomplishments, share funny stuff which happened at work, and a variety of other comments and communications. But as a public employee, when does one cross a line which makes questionable or bad behavior a disciplinary matter? Considering the following examples and the professional consequences of unethical and or prohibited actions using the social networks and digital communication. First one is an Arkansas detention officer posed nude for Playboy.com and was fired after her photo was posted online. A California officer was dismissed after it was discovered that he and his wife used a website to distribute pornographic films starring the officer and his wife. A New York officer was dismissed after it was discovered that he and his wife used a website to distribute pornographic Facebook pages indicating that he got his tactics and techniques from Training Day, a movie in which a rogue cop ransacks and pillages Los Angeles. A reserve officer was dismissed after photos of her mooning and posing in sexually explicit poses were discovered on her MySpace page. A campus police officer was charged with harassment and terminated after he created a false MySpace page based on the life of another employee. A California officer was terminated after using his department-issued two-way pager to send sexually explicit text messages to his wife and another fellow employee who was a telecommunicator. While most people can look at these synopses and see the questionable behavior, the employees in each case thought, since the actions were on their own time, posted before they were employed, or posted by someone else using the employee's image with consent, they were exempt from a disciplinary action. Obviously they were wrong, and the courts are now handling down decisions based on these and similar cases. Some activity may not result in disciplinary action, but there are times when social media is used to disseminate comments which should not be posted publicly. For an example, a 20-year-old veteran Michigan auxiliary officer was killed by a hit-and-run driver while rendering aid to a stranded motorist. His agency attempted to deliver the line-of-duty death message to his widow, but was unable to reach her because she was out of town. She soon learned of her husband's death by reading a Facebook posting of an officer from a neighboring agency. In this block of instruction, we have discussed definitions and concepts of ethics, morals, and professionalism. We have reviewed and discussed the long-established parameters of the detention profession. Understanding these concepts and understanding that the officers and employees have strict parameters in which to work, we have discussed an appropriate response to specific dilemmas. There are many choices for action. It is your responsibility to evaluate all the choices and then take the action which is morally and ethically correct. Inmates have everything to gain and very little to lose in the manipulation of officers. These games are not new. They've been around for a long time. Most employees, however, feel a strong sense of immunity to the covert action of inmates. As a detention employee, you have a job to do. That job does not include the development of a personal relationship with an inmate. Some employees feel the need to get close to inmates so the inmates will respect them. We are all human and possess the need for social belonging. The detention facility is not the place to pick your friends. You must maintain your professionalism every hour of every day. Never lose sight of the fact that inmates do not enter your facility as a direct result of excellent community behavior. Inmates play games. They play for keeps and are always looking for a target. Through self-awareness, understanding, and your professional commitment, you should have a good foundation for making good decisions. Thank you for being in this class. If you have any questions, please contact me at sfox@nhcgov.com. Thanks.